This is how to troubleshoot your quick shifter issues on a 2015 or newer BMW S1000RR. These quick shifters are awesome technology. It's so much easier to be able to just flick the lever to shift up and shift down when you need it, but they are a little bit finicky. A lot of us have had issues with these, myself included. So what I'm going to do is go through what I've learned about troubleshooting a quick shifter, and hopefully that'll help you find whatever gremlin's plaguing your shifter. When you're using your quick shifter, it's going to use input from several sensors. One of these will be the throttle position sensor. So we're going to start with recalibrating that just in case there's something goofy there. And what you're really trying to do is eliminate possibilities of the problem. So we're going to start by recalibrating the throttle position sensor to make sure that's good. Another item is this gear position sensor down here on the transmission. And basically what its job is it's a potentiometer that looks at the position of the transmission to what gear it's in, and it issues a voltage back to the ECU and associates that voltage with that gear. We want to make sure that's calibrated properly, especially if you've done work on installing a new shift assist or new shift lever or rear sets or anything like that. It's a good idea to go through and recalibrate the transmission, and here's how you do that. To do the throttle position sensor calibration and the transmission calibration, you'll need a GS911 tool. The 2015 and newer will be the red device like this versus the yellow one for the earlier years. First, remove that rear cowling, and on the 15 and newer, you're going to have a connector right up at the front. You're going to squeeze the top parts of it, and it'll come off. And then that connector is what plugs into the bottom of your GS911 tool. So you just plug that in. The other end goes into your laptop, unless you have a wireless one. And we're going to go to the S series, turn on the ignition. That way it lets the computer talk to the bike. Okay. And it's going to be an S1000RR 2015 to 18. Okay, and we'll perform an auto scan on it. All right. Any errors? No fault codes found, no fault codes, no fault codes. Okay, good deal. If you have any fault codes, they will show up there and you can clear them and then go back and look again. There's nothing that the bike thinks is wrong that would be causing any issues, so that's good. Now I'm going to go to the engine, and I'm going to go to service functions, and I'm going to go to adaptations, calibrations, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the twist grip. So I'm going to run the function. Okay, so there's where it thinks it is right now. I'm going to continue. It says switch it off, switch it on, and then it says open it to maximum and hold. And now it says close it to the minimum or idle. And it says off and back on, and it was completed successfully. Run the function, it's obtaining info, it's all happy. Now I'm going to cancel because I've already gone through and recalibrated it. So you cancel here, and now I'm going to go to the transmission, and I'm going to run this function. Now it has voltages for all those, so I'm going to continue. It wants me to turn the ignition off, turn it back on, and now before I start this, I'm going to open the garage door so I don't gas myself. Now I'm going to run the function, continue. It says turn the ignition off. It says turn it back on. All right, now we're going to reset it, which means we're going to start the bike in neutral. You're going to let it run for 10 seconds in neutral. Then we're going to pull in the clutch, put it in first, let it out. 1, 2, 9, 10. Pull in the clutch, hit the second. Now we're going to go back down to 5. All the way to 1, neutral, and then kill the engine. Now we want to run the function again, since we've reset the positions. And now we see that we have all the gear values again. We don't want to hit continue or it zeroes them out. So we're going to hit cancel. And now we know that both the throttle position and the gear shifter have been calibrated and are proper. So we're going to turn the key off. We're going to unplug the GS911 because we don't need that anymore. Now, I'm a mechanical guy, so it's easier for me to take out bolts and change out hardware than it is to troubleshoot electronics, especially on something this complicated. So I'm actually on my third quick shift device. I've gone from the HP4 to the Alpha Racing one, and now to the H&M. And I just installed the H&M, and I'm still having the same problems I was with the other two. Now, the quick shifter itself is one item that can fail. It can have outdated software in it. There are different versions of it out there. There are the old mechanical versus the pure transducer newer ones. They can be faulty, and I thought that the old HP4 one was faulty. That's why I upgraded to the Alpha, and then I upgraded to the HM one because it was newer technology. Still having the same problem. This is a good time to note that if you've changed things like your quick shifter, like your shift lever, like your rear sets, there is a possibility that the geometry could be off and you have different attack angles that can cause problems with this as well. If you're going to change quick shifters, make sure that the overall shift rod length is the same as it was before. You want to minimize variables that you're throwing into the system. If you put new rear sets on or a new shift lever, try to keep the geometry the same. If you're starting with some new components, one good thing to do is make sure to measure your attack angles around the shift rod and make sure they're as close to 90 degrees as you can for the most effective shifting. Some quick shifters like the HM have adjustable sensitivity. So if you have any other variables like that, make sure they're adjusted properly. So one of the things you want to look at is how does it behave? In other words, is it always failing? Does it just never work? And if it shifts okay in the very low RPMs, it still may not be working. It just may be that your RPMs are so low, it's not really loading the gears, so it easily kicks into the next gear. But your quick shifter may not be working. You have to be up in the higher RPMs to really know if it's working or not. If it's not working in any of the gears, then you have more of a systematic problem, right? So it could be that your gear shift sensor is failed. And if that's the case, then you can bolt in a new one and that may fix it. That's one avenue to take. The other aspect is sometimes they will have problems when they get hot. And some of them, like the HP4, I'm told had a habit of when they got hot, they would lose connection with the CAN bus, and if you turn the key off and turn it back on, they would work again. So that's a different kind of failure mechanism, and that was actually, we believe, a failure in the quick shift itself. Mine didn't do either of those things. What mine's been doing is it'll shift fine in the lower gears, but when you get into like the 5th to 6th and you're hammering on it, so I'm talking about 8,000 RPM plus, going from 5th to 6th at pretty full throttle, it's failing to go in and it feels like it just does not want to go. But where it's really pointing, the more I think about it, the more research I do, is this other component of the electronics that could be causing problems and has for other people. On these bikes, underneath the clutch handle, there are two switches. The upper one is what engages when you're full clutched in for things like launch. The bottom one actually activates when you're only about 10–20% out, something like that. If that bottom one is out, it's a safety feature, so it won't let your quick shift work or your cruise control when that switch is out. What some people have said they've seen happen is the clutch cable is too loose, so it's sort of flapping a little bit, and when you hit high speeds, that wind resistance on top of a loose cable is what's actually activating this lever too far in to where it lets out that switch, which then disables your cruise and your quick shift. And that's the first thing I'd heard of that actually made sense and seemed like what I was seeing. The other thing I noticed is that when I ride, I tend to have two fingers on the clutch lever, and the right 2 fingers on the brake, just out of habit. That's how I've always ridden. So added a little bit of wind resistance, and I had a little bit of a loose cable and a couple of fingers hanging on it. That's a recipe for getting false switch outs on that clutch. The other thing that's different about the Texas Mile, where I've never had an issue, is that while riding that, as soon as I release it in first, I'm ham-fisting that thing to stay on it. So I'm never resting the fingers back on that clutch lever. So that sort of reinforces the theory that my issue could be that little clutch switch. Now, in order to troubleshoot it, what I've done is I've tightened up the clutch lever a little bit, so it's pretty unlikely that it's loose enough to get blown back and activate that switch. However, when I go test it, I'm also going to keep my fingers here, not out there. If anything, I'll push it outward and see if that works. Now, it's interesting in looking at that switch because underneath it is a plate, and that plate has a screw right down here, and if you undo that screw, you can actually rotate that plate around and put it in position to where it holds that switch down. It's almost like they intended for that to be used as a bypass for this. So I don't like leaving something hot wired full time because I don't truly understand all the tech that goes into it, and that seems kind of not smart. But it is something that a person can do while trying to troubleshoot it. So if I'm still thinking that my switch is goofy on me while I'm riding, I can rotate that plate, tighten it down where it's holding the switch down, and it eliminates that as a possibility. So if I do that and the bike still isn't behaving properly, then I'll know it's not the clutch switch, unless the switch happens to be bad, but that's unlikely because it works in all the other gears. So for now, I'm going to leave it rotated back the way it was. Okay, so we're going to put that plate back to its original position, which is the not hot wire position. Now, when I'm all said and done, I'm going to go back and Loctite that screw and make sure it's solid. But for right now, that'll be okay. Now, the other thing to notice is that this little cylinder that pushes on that is pretty worn off, you can see. So that could be part of the problem too. So I've ordered a new one of those to replace that just in case. But with the clutch a little bit tighter, and you tighten it just by rotating the clutch cable adjustment up here, that silver ring, make sure that there's, not more than an 1/8 inch gap in here when it starts to actuate. So I'm going to keep it a little bit tighter, if anything, when I try it out to see if this solves it. The good news is I just took it for a ride and it does work. The clutch micro switch was the culprit. I just tightened this guy a little bit so that it has minimum play, and that way it can't flop back to where it activates that switch. And it's not far, that's all it takes to activate that switch. So you want it to be pretty snug, not more than 1/8 of an inch in that gap. So keep it tight. And then the other thing, like I said, is I wasn't resting my 2 fingers on this one anymore. Unfortunately, the bike is up against a tree because as I got to the gas station, I tried to put the kickstand down and about lost it. This bolt fell out of the kickstand mount just as I pulled up to the gas pump, so at least I caught it. But I had to park it up against a tree so I can put the bolt back in and get it fixed. Then we'll be good. The only quick shifter I couldn't really try out was the 21 BMW stock one. When I tried to mount it, it just wouldn't move smoothly. I think it was rubbing on the sprocket cover, and I wanted to get the bike back together with something so that I could start getting ready for the Texas Mile. Of the options I've tried, the Alpha Racing was the one that just felt the best for me. I really kind of had my hopes up for that HM because it's newer technology, it's pure transducer, it's got the adjustment for sensitivity, but ultimately, for whatever reason, the way I ride on this particular bike with its setup, the Alpha one was the one that just felt the best to me, so that's the one I went with. And now that I've got it figured out on that silly clutch cable and the clutch switch, and all that fixed, the bike's just smooth as can be. There's the downshift to 3, we're going 4, 5, smooth as glass. Subscribe to my YouTube channel below and let's celebrate turning fuel and air into adrenaline.